Welcome to part 3 and the final part of my Christmas Wreath Blender tutorial series. If you haven't seen the previous parts, definitely check out the tutorial playlist. And if you'd like to help support the channel, you can purchase the finished project files on my Gumroad store and Patreon page, and included in the project files are a bunch of different assets, so you can also use that to create your own Christmas wreath. Now, I mentioned this in the earlier parts of the tutorial series, but I am going to be using my customizable Christmas lights created with geometry nodes, and we'll be putting that on the Christmas wreath. So if you want to purchase my customizable Christmas lights, links are in the description, and we'll be appending in the Christmas lights and adding them on the Christmas wreath. Or you can also watch the tutorial that I created and learn how to create the customizable Christmas lights yourself, so all the links are in the description. And before we start, here's a quick video about my Christmas lights. With my geometry node Christmas lights, you can decorate your Christmas and holiday scenes. You can edit the curve handles to place the Christmas lights. You can also use the curved draw feature in edit mode to draw the Christmas lights to fill your scenes. The geometry node modifier has many customizable values to control the Christmas lights. The Christmas light colors are also customizable. You can Control-Shift select the node to view all of the different colors. To make the lights twinkle, just plug the Twinkling Lights node into the light string. You can then animate the Twinkling Lights value to make the lights twinkle in an animation. If you'd like to purchase the product, you can find the product links in the description. Alright, so we'll start by creating the berries. Now I actually want to select this other pine cone here and just move it over here so it's over next to the needle, and then if I select both of these I can move them over. So we'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor, and I'll go to the add menu and I can just add a UV sphere. Now I want to make the UV sphere lower topology, so if I click behind me on the UV sphere settings, let's just turn the segments and the rings down. So I'll turn the segments to 20 and the rings to like a 12. And then I can use the object context menu and shade it smooth. Then let's move this over here and we'll scale it way down so it's quite a bit smaller. Scale it down kind of like that and press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Let's go into edit mode and I'll hit the 5 on the numpad to go to orthographic view, and I'll zoom in really close. And in the very center on the top here, I want to add a little bit of a hump. So let's go here to the face select. We can deselect everything and just box select the top here, and I can hit I to inset that down, and then extrude it up and scale it, extrude it up and scale it, just like that. Go back to object mode. Actually, back in edit mode, I want to add a loop cut. Just add one loop cut there, so hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut. And then actually, if I go to the vertex select, let's hold down the Shift and Alt key, and we're going to select all of these loops, and then Shift select this loop here, or that vertex. We can scale it all down a little bit. Let's now go here to the shading workspace, and I'll zoom into the berry, and we'll go into the rendered view. Let's click here to add a new material, and I can just call this berry. And for the base color, I'm just going to make it a very dark red, and the hex value is going to be 790600, and then I'll turn the roughness to like a 0.2 so that berry is pretty shiny. Let's go into edit mode now, and make sure you have that entire top part selected. And if I click here to go to the materials, let's click on the plus here to add a new material. We'll click on new, and I can just call it like berry top. And for this one, I'm going to make it like kind of a dark brown color. Also click on the assign button in edit mode so it actually assigns that part to the material. And if you want to use the same color I'm using, that hex value is going to be 260F00. And then also the roughness, let's turn it to maybe like a 0.3 so it's pretty shiny as well, or maybe like a 0.4 so it's a little bit more rough. So we'll click back here to go to the layout, and I want to create some twigs. So I'll go to the add menu, and I'm going to add a plane, and I can bring the plane over here and scale it really small so it's close to the berries. And we're going to make a little twig, and then we're going to put the berries on the twig. So let's go into edit mode, and I can hit S to scale. I'll type 0 and then enter, and then we can hit M, and we're just going to merge by distance. So now we just have one vertex there. Also back in object mode, we'll press Ctrl A and apply the scale. So that's the default size of the object. And we can now go into edit mode, and I'll hit 1 to go to front view, and I can just extrude this, so extrude that up there, and then kind of extrude this part out, maybe extrude that over, extrude this part out, extrude that over, extrude up again, and we'll have another branch kind of coming out there. Alright, select this vertex, extrude this out again, and then maybe press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, so there's one more there, and we'll extrude this out, and just have another branch there. So you can now see we have this little twig, so it's like a really small branch. maybe even make that a bit smaller. All right, so now go back to object mode and we want to add some thickness to the branch. So on here on the modifiers panel, we'll go add modifier. We're going to add a skin modifier, so it has some thickness, but you can see that it's way too large. So if we go back into edit mode and press the A key to select everything, I want to press Control A. So Control A is going to scale the skin modifier, and I can scale it down pretty small, so it's about that big. And then if I just select the tips here, hold down the Shift key and select all the tips, we're going to scale them down even smaller, and maybe select a few more of these smaller twigs or the smaller branches and just scale them down a little bit by pressing Control A. And then if you select the very bottom one, I'll press Control A to scale it up a little bit. So the inside is just a little bit thicker. And then also click on the smooth shading checkbox right there so it's shaded smooth. And I think I'll scale the entire twig up a little bit and then press Control A and apply the scale. And then you can go back into edit mode and select everything and press Control A just to change the thickness. And also I think I'm going to scale it all down a little bit so it's squished down a little bit more. All right, so I can now select the berry and I'll duplicate the berry, put a berry right there and just press Shift D to duplicate it. We're just gonna randomly rotate the berries around. You can also do this in the material preview if that works a little bit better. So we'll duplicate it, drop it here, double tap the R key to give it a random rotation, and we're just going to place some of these holly berries on the little branch here. You can also give them slightly random scales if you want to, so some of them are slightly bigger and other ones are slightly smaller. So now I'm going to select the branch and I'll duplicate the branch and bring it over here, and we're going to have another smaller branch. So we'll go into edit mode and I can just box select the top of the branch and we'll just delete the vertices. So this smaller branch will be pretty simple. We're just going to scale it down a bit and maybe rotate these up a little bit like that. And then if I select this vertex, I can extrude it up, press Control A just to change the size of it. So Control A, scale that down. So I'll select the berries and we'll duplicate the berries, and we're just gonna stick some more of the berries just around. So there it is for the two different variations. So we have some different variations that we can place on the Christmas wreath. Now we need to add a material to the twigs. So if I just select the object, let's go over here to the shading workspace. We're just gonna make a very simple material. So I'll click on new to add a new material. I can call it twig. And for this material, I'll just search for a noise texture. I'll press Control T to add the texture coordinate and mapping, and we'll use the object coordinates. And then I can put the factor into the base color. And to make the two custom colors, I'm just going to search for a mix color and drop this here. And we'll put the noise texture factor into the factor here of the mix. And then we'll make kind of two brown colors. And for color A, the hex value is going to be 49.2B 0E. And for color B, the hex value will be 190C00. We can also turn the roughness up to like a 0.7, so it is pretty rough. And then you can't really see the noise texture that well, so let's change the settings. So I'll turn the scale up to like a 60, and I'll turn the detail up to like a 10. Let's also put it into the bump, so we'll take the factor and put that into the normal, and then we can search for a bump node, and we will put the bump node in between the noise texture and the principled shader, and we can put the factor into the height value to convert it to bump data. So now the normal can go into the normal of the principled shader, and I can see it looks just a little bit bumpy, and let's turn the strength down to like a 0.2 so it's more subtle. So that's going to be it for the very simple twig material. So if I select the other one here, we'll click on the drop down and we're going to choose the twig material. Let's press Control S to save the project. So now let's create the holly leaves. So I'll go back here to the layout. I'll press Shift A for the add menu. We're going to go down to image and we're going to add a mesh plane. So here's the image that I'm going to be using, and I mentioned this in part 1 of the tutorial, but this is the original image that I downloaded from Pixabay. But to make it work better for the tutorial, I used the clone brush to cut out the reflections and kind of remove the reflections, so it just looks like a base color map. And then I also made it a bit of a darker color and made it more green to look more like a holly leaf. And then I also cut out the image so it has transparency. So again, you can download this free image from my Gumroad store and Patreon page. Link to that is in the description. And here on the shader type, make sure it is set to principled, and then you can click on import images as planes. So let's zoom out here. I'm going to move this over and I can scale it down a bit. So let's go to front view and I'll go into edit mode, and I want to use the knife tool to cut out the leaf a bit. So I'll hit the K button for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here, and then I can click along here and just go along here, and we're just going to cut out the leaf going along here. We don't need to get it perfect because we are going to use the transparency in the image so that the edges look really sharp. So I'm just trying to get rid of most of the topology so it's a little bit smaller and it kind of fits the shape better, but I'm not cutting it out exactly because the image has transparency, so the outside and the corners will be transparent. So just continue to cut around the edges like that, and then go here on the bottom, click here, and then hit the enter button to confirm that. And that is going to cut out the leaf. So now we just need to go to the face select, and we need to select all of the other faces. So all these faces here on the outside, we'll hit X to delete, and we're going to delete the faces. You can now hit the A key to select the entire mesh, and we're going to move it up here, and we're going to stick the origin point in the very corner there on the very bottom. And then back in object mode, we'll just scale this down a bit, and I'll press Ctrl A and just apply the scale. So I do want to change the material a little bit just to make it look a bit more realistic. So we're going to go here to the shading workspace. Let's zoom into the leaf, and we'll drag the image texture out. Now, one thing that I want to do is add a bump. So we're going to search for a bump node. We'll drop this down here, and we're going to put the color into the height value of the bump. And then the bump normal can go into the normal. So this way it's going to use the pixels here of the image to make it look a bit bumpy. But to make this look a bit better, what I'm going to do is turn this distance value to like a 0.01. So a 0.01, and that way you can see most of it looks more flat, but then kind of right here where the center is, that looks a bit more bumpy. So then here on the bump strength, I'll just turn this down to a 0.5, and that looks a lot better. Now I also want to make it more shiny because holly leaves are pretty shiny. So let's turn this roughness down to like a 0.2 so it's much more reflective. We can also open up the transmission here, and then the transmission weight, let's just turn this up to maybe like a 0.2 so a little bit of light can go through the material, or maybe even a little bit less, so like maybe just like a 0.15. And then I also want to adjust the colors just slightly, so we will search for an RGB curves node, and we'll put this between the image and the principled shader. And then I want to click over here for G for green, and I can click to add a dot, and if I drag the dot into this corner, it's going to be more green, or if I drag it into this corner, it's going to be less green. So I'll just drag it up a little bit so it's slightly more green. And then if you click here on the C, that's going to be for color. I can drag it down to this corner, and that'll make it slightly darker. Now another thing I can do to make it look slightly more three-dimensional is to go back into edit mode. You can hit the K button for the knife tool, and we'll click here, and then click here and hit enter. Hit the K button for the knife tool, click here, click there and hit enter, and just do that a few more times. So use the knife tool, cut across there, and then at the very bottom, maybe cut across there, hit enter. So now what I can do is just select one face, so one face in the center. I'll hit the O key, and that's going to turn on the proportional editing, and I'll hit G to grab, bring everything over on the y-axis just so it's a little bit round, so it's coming forward a little bit. And then select everything and bring it back because I want this very point here to be right in there where the origin point is. And then back in object mode, we'll use the object context menu to shade that smooth. And now the leaf is just looking a bit more three-dimensional. We'll go back over here to the layout now. So this leaf here, we're going to leave where it is because I do want one leaf that we can place along the wreath. However, I want to have some more variations where there are some of them with berries and then some of them without twigs. So what I'll do is just box select all of these objects here, so the berries and the twigs. We will duplicate them and move them right over here. So now I can select a leaf and duplicate it and stick it over here, maybe scale it down a bit, and I can rotate it, bring it over here, and we're going to have another variation which is going to have the berries and the twigs, but then also we're going to have some leaves. So stick the leaves there, right in there where the twigs are, duplicate that, maybe rotate it around a bit. We'll duplicate this again, and then I want to flip it so it's going in the opposite direction so it looks a bit more random. So to do this, I'll press Ctrl M, and then we can hit X. So Control M and then X and then enter, and that's going to flip it. So if I go into the material preview so you can see what it looks like, you can see now the two textures are flipped. So I'll maybe move this over here, stick it there, maybe scale it down so it has a random scale. And then we'll just duplicate one more, bring this down over here and stick that there into the twig. All right, so that's going to be another variation. So that one right there. We're also going to duplicate two of these ones, rotate this one over, and we'll just have another variation which maybe has like two of them. Just put that there inside the twig. Now we'll select these two and we'll duplicate them again. And for this one, we're going to have kind of that classic holly berries with the leaves where there's like 3 holly berries in the center and then like 3 leaves coming out. So we'll duplicate this and rotate it over. All right, and we'll stick it right up there. You kind of have them overlapping. Maybe rotate these so they're a little bit more straight. And then we can select one of the berries and we can duplicate it, and we'll give it a different rotation, and we'll duplicate it again, give it another rotation, and then duplicate it again. And maybe if we select all these, we'll scale all the berries up so they're larger, and then maybe scale the clump down. And we can even move the leaves more into each other, just like that. So now we have kind of one of those classic little pieces with 3 leaves and 3 berries. So now I want to combine these different groups into one object, and that way they'll be easy to move around and place on the wreath. Now, to join them together into one object, they have to have the same modifiers, or they need to have no modifiers. So if we try to join these both together, this object would have the skin modifier on this object. So we need to select each one of the twigs, and we need to apply the skin modifier just by hovering your mouse over the skin modifier and pressing Ctrl A to apply it. So select this one, Ctrl A, and Ctrl A, and Ctrl A, and that's going to be it for all of them. So now we can box select all these ones here, not the light in the back, but just those ones, and press Ctrl J to join them into one object. We'll box select all of these, and then lastly shift select the twig and hit Ctrl J. That's one object. So this one here, Ctrl J, select these ones here, and then the last one here, join that into one object. So now they're just all one object, so we can easily move them around and place them on the wreath. So let's just box select all of the objects, and we'll duplicate them and move them here into the center, and we'll kind of bring them forward a little bit. And now we can just start to hand place them. So I like to hand place them in the camera, at least for the starting, so we can kind of see what it's going to look like. You can also go into the rendered view if you want to see how that's looking. So you can kind of rotate that one, maybe this one, move it up here. And what I want to do is have this part where the twig is, I want to have the twig center be kind of tucked more inside the wreath, and then the berries and the leaves are going to be popping out. So kind of rotate that so that is tucking in there. All right, let's scale this one up. Maybe tuck this one behind this pine cone here, like that. This one here, maybe tuck this one as well, kind of right there behind the pine cone. We'll see how that looks again by going into the camera view. That's pretty good, although maybe they could be just forward a little bit so you can see them a bit better. This one here, maybe put this one right over here and push it back in so it's more inside the wreath. And then we also have this single one here. So this one we can rotate, stick right in there. We'll duplicate this one, maybe rotate it around. We'll stick another one right in here. So just continue to place all of the leaves and the berries and the twigs until they're all placed how you like. So that's going to be it for the berries and the leaves. So let's now model the big red bow, which is going to be on the top here. So I'll just select everything and hit the H key to hide everything so we have a fresh scene. I'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor. I will go to the add menu and I'm going to go to mesh and add a plane. I'll rotate the plane. We'll rotate it on the X-axis by 90 degrees. Press Ctrl A and apply the rotation, and also scale it down maybe to just like a 0.1. Press Ctrl A and we can just apply the scale. So I'll zoom in and we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to scale it up on the Z axis so it's a bit longer like that. We're first going to start by modeling that center loop, which is just going around in a circle. So in edit mode, let's bring it forward a bit, and then I can go to the edge select and we'll select this edge, and we'll go to top view and I'll bring the edge back, and then I can extrude it out and extrude out again, extrude it out again like that, and maybe one more time. All right, something like that. If we select the other edge, we'll go to top view and I can extrude it out and extrude it out and like that. All right, so now we just have that little kind of circular piece. If we hold down the Shift key and select both loops, I'll press the F key to fill a face there and maybe bring everything forward a little bit. Let's press Ctrl 2 to add a subdivision surface, and we'll use the object context menu and shade it smooth. And then if I go into edit mode, I want to add a few loop cuts, so I'll press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. Left click and right click so it stays in the center, and I'll scale the loop cut up a little bit, and then I can press Ctrl R, left click and right click, and kind of scale it down a little bit. Ctrl R to add another loop cut, left click and right click so it stays where it is, and maybe scale that down. Also, I'm going to go to the vertex select and hold down the Alt key and select the top loop and scale it down a bit. Hold down the Alt key, select that loop and scale it down a little bit. Now, because this is going to be a cloth red bow, I want to add just a little bit of displacement so it looks a bit bumpy. So I'll go here to the modifiers, and here on the subdivision surface, I'm going to turn these levels both up to 3 so it's more subdivided and it has more geometry. Now we'll click on add modifier, and we're going to add the displace modifier, and we'll click on new to add a new texture. And then let's just click right down here to go to the texturing panel, and we'll change the image or movie to clouds instead. And here on the scale, I'm going to turn this to a 0.15, so it's a bit smaller. And then if I go here to the modifiers, I'm going to turn the strength down, so something like that. So maybe turn this to a 0.02 on the strength there, so it is pretty subtle. And actually, if I go back over here to the clouds texture again, maybe I'll scale it down a little bit smaller, even to just like a 0.1, so it's even smaller. So it looks a little bit more random now, and it will look a bit more like cloth. Now I want to add some thickness because it doesn't actually have any thickness right now. So let's click on add modifier, and I can search for the solidify modifier. And right down here, we'll turn the thickness way down. Maybe we'll turn it down to like a 0.002, so it's not very thick. And then also I want to make it a little bit more sharp on the edges. So if I go into edit mode, I'll press Ctrl R, add a loop cut there, maybe scale the loop cut down a little bit, and then Ctrl R, add another loop cut there, bring it down, and then scale it down a little bit. All right, and that's going to be it for the centerpiece. So now we're going to have some bows which are kind of coming up and then going back into the center. So we'll go into edit mode, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and select one of the loops, and I'll duplicate it and move it forward. And I can scale it. We'll scale it on the x-axis by 0, so it's much more flat. And then I'll scale it down, and let's go to top view, and I'll bring it here into the center. And then I can extrude it, and we'll extrude it again, and we'll extrude it again, and just continue to extrude it all the way back so we can have this circular bow piece, and then extrude this piece right down there. We can also go into wireframe and just box select this part and bring it back a little bit so it's longer. All right, something like that. And in object mode, we need to shade it smooth. Now, if we go back into edit mode, you can see there's some weird darkening here. That's because we need to add a loop cut, so hit Ctrl R, drag it over and place a loop cut there so it's not stretching as much, and Ctrl R and place a loop cut there. Now also because of that displace modifier, I want to add a bit more geometry here so it looks a bit more detailed. So if I go into edit mode, I'll hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I'll scroll my mouse wheel, left click and right click. So now you can see there's more detail there. And on the back here, we'll do the same thing. So Ctrl R, and I'll scroll my mouse wheel and left click and right click. So it has more geometry there and more detail. All right, hit the L key with your mouse hovered over that piece, and I'll scale it down a little bit. Now I want to make it look slightly more random. So if I hit the O key to turn on proportional editing, I can select some points here and just kind of move it randomly. So maybe drag a little point back there, drag one up here, down here. You could also do the same thing here. So maybe dragging this down, dragging that over a little bit. So it just looks a little bit more random. All right, hit the O key to turn off proportional editing, and I'll now press the L key to select that entire piece, and I'll scale the piece down and rotate it up, and we'll just kind of stick it right down there. Let's now duplicate it and bring it down here, and we'll rotate it, and we'll just move it slightly forward so it's not overlapping. And then we'll duplicate it again, and we'll make this one more straight, and we'll bring it back a little bit again so it's not overlapping, so something like that. And then if we hit the L key to select these pieces, I will duplicate them. Let's go to front view, and I can rotate them over and just bring that in like that and bring it back just a little bit. And that is the base for our bow piece. Also, if I hit L to select that loop here or that entire piece, I want to bring it down a little bit, just make it a bit smaller, maybe bring it back, and also flatten it on the x-axis a little bit. You can also turn back on the proportional editing by hitting the O key and maybe bring up some pieces and make them a little bit larger. Again, just to make it a little bit more random, make it look slightly different from the other pieces, and make it a little bit wider. So I now want to make the pieces on the bottom. So I'll hold down the Alt key, select one of these loops, and I'll duplicate it, move it forward, and I can scale it, and I want to flatten it. So after I hit S to scale, I'm going to hit Shift Z. So Shift Z will exclude the Z axis, but I'm scaling it now on the X and the Y. And I'll now type 0 and enter, and that's just going to flatten that piece. Also hit the O key to turn off proportional editing. So I'll go to front view, and I'm just going to bring this over here, and I'll rotate it. We'll type in 90 and enter, and I'm just going to scale this way down, and then I can extrude it. We'll extrude that down there, and we can also rotate it a little bit. Maybe box select this piece here or the top piece and rotate that. And we're making those longer pieces there, which are on the bottom. Now on these bottom pieces, I want to have kind of like a triangle bit. So what I'm going to do is just box select half of it, and we'll extrude this out. And then we can scale it down. We'll scale it down on the x-axis so that it's more thin. And bring that over there and scale that down. And then we'll do the same thing for this side. So box select these pieces, extrude it down, and then rotate it flat, and we can scale it down, make it really small, and then bring it over here. And then if I zoom in pretty close, let's select each vertex, and maybe move this up here, move this up here, move this up here, and then bring that down. So it's more of a really sharp kind of wedge there. We'll do the same thing for this side. So bring this down here, bring this up, and then just kind of even that out there. So it's more of like a wedge shape. If we go back to object mode, you can see the topology looks all messed up. So we'll use the object context menu and shade that smooth. And then we can press Ctrl R to add a loop cut. We can drag a loop cut right down there. And then we can also press Ctrl R, and I can scroll my mouse wheel to add some more loop cuts there in the center. Scroll until we have maybe about 8 cuts. And you can left click and right click so they stay in the center. All right, so now I can hold down the Alt key and select one of the loops, and I want to kind of make them wobbling back and forth. So I'll bring this loop forward a little bit. I'll Alt select that loop and bring it back a little bit. Alt select that loop and bring it forward a little bit. And just continue to do that so it looks a little bit more wobbly and random, almost like a ribbon. Now right down here, I want to sharpen this up even more. So I'm going to use the knife tool. So I'll hit K for the knife tool, and I'm going to click here in this corner, and I can click here and then drag all the way up, click here, and then we can click right here, and then right there, and then we'll go all the way down, click right there, and then at the very end. So click there and hit enter. And by adding those loops, it's going to sharpen that up. Let's also sharpen this part up here because I want it to be really sharp here instead of round. So I'll hit the K button for the knife tool, click there, there, and then over here, and then at the very end, and hit enter just to sharpen that up. So now we have a cool ribbon. So back in edit mode, hit the L key to select that entire piece, and I can scale it. Let's move it over here and just fit it right there in the bottom of the bow there, and bring it up a little bit, and also bring it behind the other objects. We can also go into wireframe and then just box select some of these pieces and maybe rotate them over a little bit, rotate that over. And then I want to have one more piece, so we'll duplicate this piece. We can hit Control M to mirror it, and then I can hit X and then enter, so it is mirrored. And then maybe bring this over, maybe scale it up a little bit so it's a bit longer. And then just box select some areas, and to deselect some areas which are already box selected, you can click and drag with your middle mouse wheel and then let go to deselect that part. Maybe bring that down a little bit, deselect this part. And we're going to have one of them be longer. So this side is going to be a little bit longer. Now something else that I also noticed is that displacement is a little bit too strong for me. So if I go back here to the displacement, we'll turn the strength maybe to just like a 0.01. So it's like half as strong. And then also that ribbon, maybe just hold down the Shift and Alt key and select some of those loops, and you can move them forward a little bit. So let's now create a material for the bow. So we'll go here to the shading workspace. We'll zoom into the bow. I'll also press Alt H to unhide everything so we can see the lighting. So we'll select the bow, we'll add a new material, and I can just rename this to bow. And then I'm going to be adding in some fabric textures that I mentioned in part 1. So we already enabled the Node Wrangler add-on, so I can select the principled shader and press Ctrl Shift T. So when you press Ctrl Shift T all at once using the Node Wrangler, that'll bring up Blender's file browser, and we can go here into the textures folder. So you can download the textures from Ambient CG, link is in the description, and I downloaded the 2K JPEG version, and then just extract the zip file once you've downloaded it. So I'll go into the extracted folder, and I want to select the color, hold down the Control key and select the roughness and the normal GL. So just color, roughness, and normal GL, and then click on Principled Texture Setup. And you can see it's going to automatically set up all the texture maps correctly. So it's using the UVs. It's also putting the bump there into the bump and the roughness and then the base color. So now I need to unwrap this, but before I unwrap it, I do want to add one seam here at the very end. So if I go into edit mode, I can deselect everything, just hold down the Alt key and select that loop right there. And I want to add a seam, so I'll press Ctrl E and I can just click on Mark Seam. Now I can select everything and I can just hit U and I will just choose Unwrap. Now to see the UV unwrapping, just click here to go to the UV editing workspace. And you can see everything is pretty flat, so that already looks pretty good on default. Let's go into the rendered viewport mode to see how that's looking. Now I need to go into edit mode and select the entire mesh, and then hit the A key to select the UV editing. And I'm going to scale it quite a bit bigger, maybe like 2 or 3 times the size. so that the texture is quite a bit smaller. Something like that is probably pretty good, so we just have a cloth ribbon. So we'll go back over here to the shading workspace, and we'll go into the rendered view. And now I want to change the colors because obviously I want it to be a red bow. So to change the colors but still be able to see the texture, we can search for a color ramp. We'll put the color ramp here right after the base color. Now on the black tab here, this one we're going to make red and we're going to make it kind of dark. So kind of like a dark red. Then here on the white tab, we're going to make this one a bright red. And then also I can drag this tab over and maybe drag this over a little bit so it's a bit more contrasty. So now you can see we have a bright red ribbon. Now also I think the bump strength is a bit too strong. So here on the bump strength, I will turn this to a 0.4. So just change the strength there on the normal map so it's not quite as bumpy. And then another thing I want to do is make it look a bit more shiny. So to do this, we can change the colors of the roughness. So to change the brightness and darkness of the roughness, we can add a hue saturation value node, and we'll put this in between the roughness and the principled. So now we have this value that we can make lighter and darker, and that is going to change how rough and shiny it is. So I'm going to turn the value down to like a 0.4, so now you can see it looks a bit more reflective and shiny. Now one more thing I'm going to do to make it look more like cloth is to open up the sheen here, and I can turn the sheen weight all the way up to 1. Now the sheen is kind of going to add that kind of bright area there on the corners or the edges. And then here on the sheen tint, we can make this kind of like a slight yellow color and pretty bright. And if you want to use the same sheen tint color, the hex value is going to be FF7159. So I'll go back here to the layout, we can select the bow, and I'll move it up here, and let's bring it forward and kind of scale it, stick it right there. We'll go into the rendered viewport mode to see how that's looking. Maybe double tap the R key to use the trackball rotation and just stick it right there. So that's pretty nice. Now some of the pine needles are going through the bow. So if we go into edit mode by hitting tab with the needle selected, we can select some of the needles. So select some of those handles there and just move the handles right back there so it's not going through. So select some of these, kind of pull them back. And there's also 2 objects, so we might need to go into edit mode of the other object and just pull that back a little bit. That one there, go into edit mode and just pull these back a little bit. Press Ctrl S to save the project. So I'm now going to be adding in my customizable Christmas lights created with geometry nodes. So if you'd like to help support the channel, you can purchase the product, and the product comes with the customizable Christmas lights, and it comes with customizable values. It also comes with a light shader, so you can change the colors of the lights, and you can make a custom color. It also comes with some different light bulb types. So I'll have the links in the description if you want to purchase it, or you can also watch the tutorial and learn how to create it yourself. So what I'm going to do is click on File, and then click on Append. So for anyone who's purchased the product, you can just navigate to the product files, and I'm going to go inside the Blender files folder, and then I'm going to click on this one here and go inside the geometry node Christmas lights. Then I'm going to head over to the objects folder, and in the objects folder, I just want to select the Christmas lights. You can add the other light bulb types if you want to, but I'm just going to click on Christmas lights and click on Append. So that is going to append in the curve object, and the curve object has the geometry nodes, and then because this object is being distributed on the curve, it's also going to add the Christmas light. So I'll just move the Christmas light over here out of the way. We'll select this object here, the actual Christmas lights, and we'll put it in front of the object. All right, let's hit the 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I can go into edit mode, and I'm actually going to select all the curve handles and just delete everything. And actually, if I go back to object mode real quick, you can see the origin is right over here. So let's just move the origin so it's in the center, and then hit tab to go back into edit mode. So now I'm going to be using the draw feature to draw the curves. So you can hit the T key to open up the side panel, and you can click on this button here to draw curves. So now you can click along here and just draw the curves wherever you want the Christmas lights to be. So I'm going to kind of draw them so they go around the bigger objects. So kind of around the pine cones and kind of around the berries. So like that, going back and forth here. All right, and then towards the very end, just bring it right there and then click to let go. And now you can see that it's added all those Christmas lights. So if I bring it forward, you can see that's what we've drawn. So we'll select the Christmas lights and bring them back in here. Just bring them slightly inside. And then if you need to, you can go into edit mode and you can select some of the handles and you can move the curve handles around. So just make sure that nothing is like overlapping, because if a Christmas light is like going through one of the leaves, it might look a bit weird and not look realistic. So just go through here. You can also maybe do this in the material preview so it looks a bit better. You can kind of see it better, and just kind of move the curve handles around where you want. This is actually looking pretty good though. Maybe this one here, I can move this one back a bit. This one here is kind of going through this pine cone, so I might move this one just back a bit and move this back a little bit. So now what I want to do is just add a few more lights. So right over here we have the geometry nodes modifier setup, and you can see right here there is a light spacing. So if I turn the light spacing down, there's going to be lots more lights. So I think I'll turn the light spacing to like a 0.1, or maybe turn that up a little bit, maybe like a 0.14. So there are going to be more lights. And I think that is looking pretty good. Now I also want to edit the colors of the lights. So to edit the colors of the lights, we need to select the instance object because that has the material. And we'll now go here to the shading workspace. So you can see the Christmas lights comes with this custom light shader. Make sure you select the lights. And what I'm going to do, if you want to, you can hold down the Control and Shift key and then select all the different light bulb types to see the colors. What I'm going to do is plug the custom color into the surface. And then here on the custom color, I'm going to make this kind of like a gold color. And if you want to use the same custom color I'm using, you can use a hex value of FF8800. And then also the light strength, I'm going to turn this up a bit to 40. And then when we add the bloom in the compositor, it'll be a little bit brighter. All right, so let's now add a background. So I'll go back here to the layout. We'll go into the camera view. And to add the background, we'll press Shift C to center the 3D cursor. And then we'll go to the add menu. We can go to image and we can add the mesh plane. You can now go back to the folder where you downloaded the textures, or just go to wherever you downloaded the image texture. Now here is the Christmas tree image that I downloaded from Pixabay, but then I put the image into Krita and I just blurred the image with a basic Gaussian blur, and then I saved out the image. And it's more blurred, so it just kind of adds a cool ambience to the background. Now here on the shader type, I'm going to set this to emission, and then we can click on import images as planes. So we'll drag the image way back here in the background, and I can scale it up pretty big. Let's go into the camera view and go into the rendered mode to see how that's looking, and I can scale it up, and you can see how that's adding just a nice ambience to the background. And I do want to add a bit of a blur, so it'll be blurred even more, and just the camera will be focusing on the things which are in the front. So what I'm going to do is go to the add menu. We can go down here to empty, and I'm going to add an empty sphere. Now why I'm using an empty object is because the empty objects don't have any visible faces, so you won't be able to see them in the render. So I'll now scale the empty way down, and I'll bring the empty right up here, maybe zoom in, and I'll bring the empty over, and I just want to stick the empty maybe right about here, maybe right down there. So now just the things at the very front are going to be in focus, so some of these needles in the back will be a little bit blurred. So we'll go back into the rendered view, and then if you click here on the corner of the camera to select the camera, you can go to the camera settings, and we want to check mark the depth of field. And then we can click on the eyedropper to choose an object, and we're going to choose the empty. So now you can change the f-stop value. So if you turn the f-stop way down, things are going to be very blurred. I'm going to turn the f-stop value to like a 0.8. So now if I zoom in here, you can see kind of in the back, it's a little bit blurred, but most things are in focus. But then the background is even more blurred, and that's looking great. Now regarding the background, I do want to change the colors a little bit. So let's click here to go to the shading workspace, and we can change the colors a bit. So what we can actually do is just take the color and put that directly into the surface, and that will act as an emission. And then we can select the principled shader and just delete it. So now I want to change the colors. So we're just going to search for the RGB curves, and we'll stick this here between the image and the material output. And the first thing that I want to do is make it a bit darker. So I'll just drag this tab down to make it just a little bit darker. And then if I click here on the B for blue, I can drag this up a little bit so there's a little bit more blue values. So that's looking pretty good. So now we can render the image and do the compositing. So I'll go back over here to the layout, and if I go up here to the render properties, actually here to the output properties, I'll be rendering this out as 2560 by 2560, so it's a nice large image. And also if we go to the render properties, we can open up the sampling, and I'll be rendering this with 100 samples, and I'm also going to turn on the denoise so it denoises the image. So we'll just save this image again, and then choose render, and we can render image. And the image is finished rendering, so now we can click here to go to Blender's compositor. So we'll click on use nodes to use the compositing nodes, and then we'll start by adding a bloom. So let's search for the glare node. We'll drop the glare right here between the render layers and the image, the composite. And then also, because we turn on the node wrangler, you can hold down the Control and Shift key and select the glare, and that'll add the viewer node so we can preview it in the background. And I'll press the V key to zoom out the image. You can press Alt V to zoom in and V to zoom out, so we can kind of preview that image. Now on the streaks here, I'm going to change this to bloom instead because I like that better, but you could use whichever one you want. And then you can see it's just going to make the brightest parts of the image brighter, but I'm going to turn up this threshold, and that way it's only going to make the very brightest parts bright. And if I turn up the threshold more and more, it's going to be more and more subtle of a bloom. So maybe I'll just start by turning it to like a 10. That looks pretty good. I think 10 is pretty good. Now I also want to add a vignette, and a vignette is going to have some darkness around the corners. So what I'm going to do is search for an alpha over node. We can drop this here, and we want the viewer and the composite to be both going into the alpha over. So now I need to create a black outline, and we can blur the black outline to make the vignette. So to do this, we can search for the box mask and drop this here, and I'll drag the box mask bigger. And if I Control Shift and select it to preview it, you can see there's a black background with a white box. So I can drag the width to make it longer here. So if you select the box mask, there's going to be like an outline, a white outline. So I'm going to drag this pretty big, and then on the height, I'll also drag it pretty big. So now it's white with a little black background there in the corners. So I can now blur this image so it looks soft. So we're going to search for a blur node, drop it here, and both on the X and Y, I'm going to turn these both to 500. So we'll wait for that to load up. It's just going to make a very subtle black outline. So now I can take the blur and I can put that into the factor, and then I can take the glare and I can put that into the bottom one. And I can Control Shift and select the alpha over node to preview it. Now this image here, the white one, that is going to be the color of the vignette. So I'm going to make the color of the vignette fully black. So basically the blur node, by going into the factor, that's determining what part is going to be the top image and what part is going to be the bottom image. So now you can see we have this nice blackness around the corners, so it kind of brings your eyes into the center of the scene. So now we can save this image. So we're going to press the F11 key, and that is going to go over here to the image editor. And then to preview the final compositing, we want to click on the render result, and we want to search for the viewer node, and that's the final compositing. So I can now click on image, and I'll click on save as. And I can just save this as a wreath. You can save it as a PNG or a JPEG image, and I will save this image. So I hope you were easily able to follow along, and thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed creating your own Christmas wreath. And if you're enjoying these videos and you'd like to help support me and this channel, you can also purchase the finished project files. Links to that are in the description. You can also purchase my customizable Christmas lights created with geometry nodes, and that way you can easily add Christmas lights to your Christmas renders. And if you're creating some Christmas renders and you need some Christmas ornaments, then definitely consider checking out my Christmas Ornaments asset pack, which comes with many different Christmas ornaments, and they're all pre-set up in Blender's asset browser. So once you set up the asset library in Blender, you can just drag and drop the Christmas ornaments into your holiday scenes to decorate your Christmas tree or whatever you're creating. And if you'd like to watch more of my Christmas and holiday themed tutorials, definitely check out my Christmas tutorial playlist. Link to that is in the description. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and Merry Christmas.